The alarm clock's harsh buzzer cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 4:30 a.m. Matthew Coleman's weathered hand reached out from under the thin blanket, fumbling to silence the noise before it could wake his children. His body protested as he swung his legs over the edge of the bed, every muscle aching from another 16-hour day at Westmont Regional Airport. At 52, Matthew looked older than his years. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and stress lines around his mouth seemed to deepen with each passing week. The small bedroom felt cramped with basic furniture he'd managed to keep after the medical bills forced them to downsize. Through thin walls, he could hear the neighbor's television, a constant reminder of how little privacy their current living situation afforded. "Just get through today," he whispered to himself. The same mantra he'd been repeating for the past 2 years since Grace had passed. The funeral expenses, combined with crushing medical debt from her cancer treatment, had transformed their comfortable middle-class life into a daily struggle for survival. In the kitchen, Matthew quietly prepared his usual breakfast of instant coffee and toast, careful not to wake Hannah and Marcus Jr. The refrigerator hummed loudly, a concerning sound that meant another appliance was breaking down. A note stuck to the door caught his attention, written in Hannah's careful handwriting. "Dad, don't forget parent-teacher conference Thursday. Also, Marcus needs new basketball shoes. His coach says the ones he has are unsafe. Love you." Matthew's heart sank as he calculated the cost against their stretched budget. Hannah's senior year expenses were mounting, and Marcus Jr.'s growing feet seemed to outpace their ability to keep up. The parent-teacher conference would likely bring more requests for things they couldn't afford: college application fees, graduation expenses, class ring payments. His phone buzzed with a text from Veronica Gutierrez, his supervisor. "Matt, can you come in early today? We've got a commercial jet with hydraulic issues that came in overnight. Customer is pushing for quick turnaround." Matthew typed back quickly, "On my way in 20 minutes. Every emergency call, every weekend shift, every holiday worked was another small step toward financial stability. Matthew had been averaging 70-hour weeks for the past 6 months, taking on every available assignment to make ends meet. The drive to Westmont Regional Airport took 25 minutes through quiet Kansas streets. Dawn was beginning to break over the flat horizon, painting the sky in soft pink and orange hues that reminded Matthew of Grace's watercolor paintings. She used to wake early to capture the sunrise, claiming that morning light held possibilities the rest of the day couldn't match. Westmont Regional sprawled across several hundred acres of prairie land, serving both commercial and private aircraft. The main terminal building stood against the morning sky, its control tower blinking with navigation lights. Hangars dotted the landscape like massive metal barns, each housing aircraft worth millions of dollars. For Matthew, this place had become both sanctuary and prison where his skills were valued, but his time was consumed entirely. The maintenance facility hummed with activity even at this early hour. Aircraft don't adhere to normal business schedules, and neither do the people who keep them flying. Matthew badged into the building, the familiar smell of jet fuel, hydraulic fluid, and metal polish greeting him like an old friend. "Morning."
"Matt," called Austin Reed, a younger mechanic who'd been working at the facility for about 3 years. At 29, single, Austin still had the energy that comes with not having the weight of family responsibilities. "Veronica's looking
"For you. That hydraulic job turned into something bigger." Matthew nodded, clocking in and grabbing his toolbox. A metal companion for over 25 years, its drawers organized with the precision that comes from thousands of hours of experience. Each tool had its place, each instrument carefully maintained and ready for whatever challenge the day might bring. Veronica Gutierrez emerged from the supervisor's office, her expression mixing relief and concern. At 48, she'd been managing the maintenance department for 8 years, and she knew Matthew was her most reliable technician. She also knew he was pushing himself beyond sustainable limits. "Matt, thanks for coming in early. We've got a situation with that bombardier that came in last night. The hydraulic leak is worse than initially reported, and there are some electrical issues that seem related. The owner is some business executive who needs to be in Denver by noon." "What's that? The timeline looking like?" Matthew asked, already mentally cataloguing potential problems and solutions. If we can get it diagnosed and repaired by 10, they can still make their meeting. The pilot seems competent, but he's concerned about electrical issues. Says there were instrument warnings during landing that he's never seen before. Matthew followed Veronica across the hangar floor toward the private jet. The Bombardier Global 6000 sat elegantly in the maintenance bay, its white fuselage gleaming under fluorescent lights. These aircraft represented the pinnacle of private aviation, worth upward of $60 million and equipped with technology that rivaled commercial airliners. "The passenger seems nice enough," Veronica continued as they walked. "Older woman, traveling alone. She's waiting in the executive lounge, pretty understanding about the delay. Goes by the name Beth Thomas, says she's in consulting." Matthew nodded absently, his attention already focused on the aircraft. The Bombardier's engine cowlings were open, revealing complex turbofan engines. Hydraulic fluid stained the hangar, floor beneath the left engine indicating a leak that could range from minor seepage to major system failure. As they approached, Matthew could see Austin underneath the left wing, flashlight in hand, tracing hydraulic lines through the maze of components. The young mechanic's expression showed concentration mixed with frustration, a look Matthew recognized from his own early years. "What have you got, Austin?" Matthew called out, setting his toolbox down and pulling on work gloves. This was Matthew's world, a place where his 26 years of experience meant something, where his expertise was respected, where he could solve problems that others couldn't. But it was also the place that was slowly killing him, one 16-hour day at a time, as he struggled to provide for his family, while the weight of responsibility grew heavier with each passing month. What Matthew didn't know was that today would be different. Today someone was watching who had the power to change everything. Austin slid out from under the wing, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "It's not just a simple leak, Matt. The hydraulic reservoir is down about 40%, but
I can't find where all that fluid went."
"There's evidence of leakage around the main pump, but not enough to account for what's missing." Matthew crouched down to examine the area Austin had been investigating. His trained eye immediately picked up details that experience had taught him to recognize the pattern of fluid residue, the color and consistency of the leaked hydraulic fluid, the way certain components showed signs of stress or wear. "Hand me that inspection mirror," Matthew said, extending his hand without looking away from the aircraft. Austin quickly provided the tool, and Matthew peered into areas that couldn't be seen directly. Years of experience had taught him that aircraft systems were interconnected in ways that weren't always obvious. "There," Matthew said quietly, pointing to a spot deep within the engine compartment. "See that discoloration on the electrical harness? That's not just hydraulic fluid. That's evidence of electrical arcing." Austin leaned in to look where Matthew was pointing. "I don't see it." "Right there, where the main electrical bundle passes, near the hydraulic manifold. See how the insulation looks melted in that one spot? That's what happens when hydraulic fluid gets onto high-voltage electrical connections." The implications were significant. This wasn't just a maintenance issue. It was a potential safety hazard that could affect multiple aircraft systems. Hydraulic fluid on electrical connections could cause short circuits, system failures, or even electrical fires. Veronica had been listening, and her expression grew serious. "How long to fix something like that?" Matthew stood up, his knees protesting, after crouching for several minutes. "Depends on how extensive the damage is. Could be a few hours if we're lucky. Could be most of the day if we need to replace major components. I'll need to do a complete system check before I know for sure." As Matthew began gathering diagnostic equipment, a woman approached the work area. She was in her mid-40s, wearing casual but expensive-looking clothes, and carried herself with quiet confidence. Her greying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she observed the maintenance operation with genuine interest rather than impatience. "I'm Beth Thomas," she said, introducing herself to Matthew. "I understand you're the mechanic working on my aircraft." Matthew looked up from his work, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Matthew Coleman, sorry about the delay, but we found some issues that need proper attention before this aircraft is safe to fly. Please don't apologize. I appreciate thorough work. May I ask what the problem is?" Matthew was struck by her genuine interest in the technical details. Most passengers wanted to know when the aircraft would be ready, not how the repairs were being performed. He explained the hydraulic leak and electrical contamination in terms a non-technical person could understand. "So this could have caused problems during flight?" Beth asked. "Potentially, yes. Hydraulic systems control critical flight functions like landing gear, flight controls, and braking systems. Electrical problems could affect navigation, communications, or engine management systems. It's better to fix everything properly on the ground than deal with emergencies in the air." Beth nodded thoughtfully. "How long have you been doing this kind of work?" 26 years in aviation maintenance. Started right out of high school, worked my way up through different types of aircraft." As Matthew returned his attention to the electrical connection he was installing, Beth continued the conversation. "It must be satisfying work knowing that people's safety depends on your expertise." "It is," Matthew agreed, though his voice carried an undertone of exhaustion. "Though it can be stressful too. There's no margin for error in aviation maintenance. Everything has to be done right the first time." Austin had been listening while organizing tools nearby. He was impressed by how patiently Matthew explained technical concepts, taking time he didn't really have to ensure the passenger understood the importance of proper maintenance procedures. "Matt's one of the best mechanics in this region," Austin added. "He's saved our department on dozens of complicated repairs. Management calls him in whenever there's a problem nobody else can solve." Matthew felt slightly uncomfortable with the praise, but what he didn't notice was how carefully Beth Thomas was observing not just his technical skills, but his character, his work ethic, and his obvious dedication to doing the job correctly, despite being clearly exhausted. The morning was slipping away, and Matthew knew his day was about to become much longer than originally planned. But as he focused on the complex repair, he remained unaware that his professionalism under pressure was being evaluated by someone who had the power to change his entire future. Matthew spent the next 2 hours methodically tracing the electrical and hydraulic systems throughout the Bombardier's engine compartment. What had initially appeared to be a straightforward leak had evolved into a complex diagnostic puzzle. The electrical harness damage extended further than he'd first realized, with multiple connection points showing signs of contamination and potential failure. "Veronica, I need you to see this," Matthew called from beneath the aircraft's wing. His supervisor approached, crouching down to peer into the cramped space where Matthew was working. "The hydraulic leak started here," Matthew explained, pointing to a fitting deep within the engine bay. "But the real problem is that this aircraft has been flying with this leak for weeks, maybe months. The hydraulic fluid has been misting onto the electrical systems every time the pumps engage during flight operations." Veronica's expression grew grave as she understood the implications. That means potential system failures could happen during critical flight phases. Exactly. Takeoff, landing, any time the hydraulic systems are under maximum load, the electrical contamination could cause multiple system failures simultaneously. Austin had been listening while organizing tools nearby. At 29, he was still learning the intricacies of aviation maintenance, and moments like these provided invaluable education about the complexity of aircraft systems. "How do we fix something like this?" Austin asked. Matthew carefully extracted himself from under the wing, his back aching from the awkward position. "First, we need to completely drain and flush the hydraulic system. Then we replace every contaminated electrical connection, test all related circuits, and rebuild the hydraulic manifold assembly. It's not difficult work, but it's time-consuming and requires absolute precision." The clock on the hangar wall showed 8:45 a.m. Matthew calculated the hours needed for proper repairs. The passenger's noon deadline was becoming increasingly unrealistic, but rushing aircraft maintenance was never an option. Safety protocols existed for good reasons, written in regulations developed through decades of experience and, unfortunately, accidents. "I'll call the executive lounge and explain the situation," Veronica said. Most experienced travelers understand that aircraft maintenance can't be rushed. As Veronica walked toward the office, Matthew began gathering the tools and parts he would need for the repair. The hangar's parts inventory contained most standard components, but some specialized electrical connectors might need to be ordered from suppliers. He hoped they had everything necessary to complete the job without delays. Around 10:30 a.m., Veronica returned from the office with an update. "I spoke with the passenger. She's very understanding about the delay, says safety is more important than schedules, and she'd rather have the aircraft properly repaired than rush the job." "Smart woman," Matthew commented, carefully inspecting an electrical connector under a magnifying lamp. Most people in private aviation understand the stakes involved. She asked if she could observe the repair process. Says she's curious about aircraft maintenance. "I told her it would be fine as long as she stays clear of the work area and wears safety equipment." A few minutes later, Beth Thomas returned to the work area wearing safety glasses and remaining at a respectful distance. Matthew noticed she wasn't checking her phone constantly or showing signs of impatience like most delayed passengers. Instead, she watched his methodical approach with what appeared to be genuine professional interest. "Mr. Coleman," she said, during a brief pause in his work. "When was the last time you took a proper break?" Matthew paused, realizing he couldn't remember his last real day off. "I work most days. My family needs the income, so I take whatever shifts are available." "That must be difficult, maintaining this level of concentration when you're working. So many hours." "You do what you have to do," Matthew said simply, returning to his work on the electrical connections. Beth Thomas had been observing Matthew for over 3 hours now, and she couldn't help but notice how his professionalism never wavered despite his obvious fatigue. His commitment to completing every required test, his patience in explaining procedures to Austin, his thorough documentation of all work performed, all while clearly exhausted. What Matthew didn't realize was that Beth Thomas was mentally cataloging much more than his technical abilities. She was evaluating his character, his leadership potential, and his dedication to excellence under pressure. She was also beginning to understand the personal circumstances that drove him to work such punishing schedules. As the afternoon wore on and the repair work continued, Matthew's exhaustion became more apparent. He was taking longer breaks, occasionally pausing to rest his eyes, and his normally steady hands showed slight tremors when handling delicate components. But his standards never dropped, and his focus on safety never wavered. The pressure was building in ways Matthew couldn't see, not just the physical and mental strain of the complex repair, but the growing attention of someone who had spent her career recognizing exceptional talent when she saw it. By 2 p.m., Matthew had been working for 9 straight hours with minimal breaks. The complex nature of the repairs demanded sustained concentration, and the combination of physical exertion, mental focus, and chronic exhaustion was taking its toll. His movements remained precise, but Austin noticed he was working more slowly and occasionally steadying himself against the aircraft. The final testing phase required Matthew to power up the Bombardier's engines while monitoring dozens of gauges, readouts, and system indicators. He climbed into the cockpit, his tired body settling into the pilot's seat as he began bringing the aircraft systems online. "Austin, I need you on the ground monitoring the engine bay," Matthew called through the cockpit window. "Watch for any signs of leakage, unusual sounds, or visual abnormalities during the engine start sequence." Austin positioned himself near the left engine with a fire extinguisher and radio. Standard safety protocol during maintenance engine runs. Beth Thomas stood at a safe distance, her attention focused intently on the testing procedure. The first engine started smoothly, its turbofan spinning up to idle speed with the distinctive whistle of modern jet engines. Matthew carefully monitored the hydraulic pressure readings, electrical system status, and engine parameters displayed on the multifunction screens. "Engine 1 looking good," Austin reported over the radio. "No visible leaks, normal exhaust signature, all external indicators appear normal." With both engines running at idle, Matthew began cycling through the hydraulic system tests, landing gear retraction and extension, flight control surface movements, brake system pressure checks. Each test stressed different components of the systems he had repaired, verifying that the work could withstand the demands of actual flight operations. "Hydraulic systems responding normally," Matthew announced. "Pressure holding steady, no fluctuations during load cycling." The electrical system tests came next, complex procedures that verified the integrity of every connection Matthew had, cleaned and replaced. Navigation systems, communication radios, engine management computers, flight control systems, the aircraft's sophisticated electronics had to coordinate seamlessly for safe flight operations. As Matthew worked through the systematic testing procedures, his exhaustion began manifesting more obviously. He found himself double-checking readings he would normally trust immediately. The concentration required was demanding more effort than it should have. "All readings look good from where I'm standing," Austin called over the radio. "Everything seems to be responding normally to your inputs." "Copy that. Running the final electrical load test now," Matthew replied, though his voice carried the fatigue he was trying to suppress. The electrical load tests required Matthew to activate multiple systems simultaneously, creating the kind of power demands the aircraft would experience during normal flight operations. Cabin pressurization, environmental controls, navigation systems, communications equipment, all drawing power while the engines provided electrical generation. "Electrical systems stable under full load," Matthew reported. "All voltages within normal parameters, no fluctuations or anomalies detected." Beth Thomas had been watching Matthew work for over 6 hours now, and she could see he was pushing himself beyond reasonable limits. His knuckles were white as he gripped the controls, and she could see the effort it was taking to maintain the precise inputs required for the testing procedures. The high-power testing continued for 15 minutes, stressing every system Matthew had repaired while verifying that the aircraft could safely handle the demands of normal flight operations. His concentration never wavered, but the physical and mental strain of maintaining such focused attention was becoming increasingly difficult. As Matthew began the engine shutdown procedures, carefully following the prescribed sequence to avoid damaging the sophisticated turbofan engines, he felt a wave of satisfaction mixed with overwhelming relief. The repairs had been completely successful, and the aircraft was now safe for flight operations. "All tests completed successfully," Matthew announced as the engines wound down to silence. "Aircraft is ready for flight operations. All discrepancies have been corrected and all systems are functioning normally." But as he began gathering his testing equipment and preparing to climb down from the cockpit, the combination of extreme fatigue, sustained stress, and the physical demands of 10 hours of intensive labor was about to catch up with him in a way he never expected. The paperwork required after completing major aircraft repairs was extensive and critical. Matthew sat at a small desk in the maintenance office, filling out Federal Aviation Administration forms that documented every aspect of the work performed. His handwriting, normally neat and precise, showed slight tremors from exhaustion. "Veronica, could you review these entries before I sign off?" Matthew called to his supervisor, following standard procedure for major repairs. Veronica approached the desk, reviewing Matthew's documentation with practiced eyes. "Everything looks complete and accurate, Matt. Your work on this aircraft was exceptional. The customer is getting a lot more value than they paid for." As Matthew signed his technician certification on the final form, authorizing the aircraft's return to service, his hand paused momentarily. The signature represented his professional guarantee that the work had been performed correctly and that the aircraft was safe for flight operations. "Almost done," Matthew replied to Austin's concerned suggestion about taking a break, though his voice carried a weariness that suggested he was running on determination alone. "Just need to complete the logbook entries and get everything filed properly." As he wrote the final logbook entry, Matthew felt a strange lightness in his head, as if the hangar around him was becoming less substantial. He attributed the sensation to fatigue and continued working, determined to complete all required documentation. Beth Thomas noticed Matthew's increasingly pale complexion and the way he occasionally paused to steady himself against the desk. Her concern was growing, but she hesitated to interfere with procedures she didn't fully understand. "Mr. Coleman," she said quietly, "are you feeling all right? You look like you might need to rest." Matthew looked up from the logbook, trying to focus on her face. The fluorescent lights seemed unusually bright, and he was having difficulty concentrating on the words he was writing. "I'm fine, just tired." "Long day, but I've had longer," Matthew said, though the statement wasn't entirely truthful. He had worked many long days, but rarely under such intense pressure and complex technical demands. As Matthew stood up from the desk to hand over the completed paperwork, the combination of exhaustion, dehydration, and sustained stress finally overwhelmed his body's ability to compensate. The hangar around him seemed to tilt sideways, and his vision began to narrow into a dark tunnel.
"I think I need to," Matthew began, but never finished the sentence. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to the concrete floor of the maintenance office, the completed paperwork scattering around him. Austin Reed reacted immediately, dropping
to his knees beside Matthew and checking for signs of consciousness. "Matt, can you hear me?" He looked up at the others in the office. "Someone call the paramedics." Beth Thomas moved quickly to Matthew's side, her demeanor shifting from interested observer to someone taking charge of an emergency situation. "Don't move him until we know what's wrong. Is he breathing normally?" "Breathing is steady. Pulse is rapid but strong," Austin reported, his first aid training serving him well. "He's unconscious, but his vital signs seem stable." Veronica was already on the phone with emergency services, providing clear information about the situation and location. "We need paramedics at Westmont Regional Airport, Hangar 7. We have a 52-year-old male who collapsed unconscious, breathing normally." Within minutes, paramedics entered the office with medical equipment and began their assessment of Matthew's condition. "Sir, can you hear me?" the lead paramedic called, checking Matthew's pupils with a small flashlight. "What's his name?" "Matthew Coleman," Austin provided. He's been working for 11 hours straight, very demanding technical work. He collapsed while completing paperwork. The paramedics began evaluating Matthew's vital signs, checking blood pressure, heart rate, and blood sugar levels. Blood pressure is elevated, heart rate is rapid, blood sugar is low, the paramedic reported to his partner. Looks like exhaustion complicated by dehydration and probably inadequate nutrition. Let's get an IV started and transport him for evaluation. As the paramedics prepared to transport Matthew to the hospital, he began to regain consciousness, though he remained disoriented and weak. His first words were characteristic of his dedication. "Did I finish the paperwork?" "The paperwork is complete," Austin assured him. "Everything is properly documented and filed. You don't need to worry about anything right now." Beth Thomas leaned closer as the paramedics prepared the gurney. "Mr. Coleman, you're going to the hospital for evaluation. Is there someone we should call? Family members who should know what's happened?" Matthew's thoughts turned immediately to his children. "My daughter Hannah and my son Marcus. They're at home. I need to let them know I'm okay." "What's their phone number?" Beth asked, pulling out her cell phone. "I'll call them and explain what happened." Matthew provided Hannah's number, though he was clearly struggling to remember details through his exhaustion. "Tell them I'm okay," he insisted as the paramedics lifted the gurney. "Tell them this is just exhaustion, nothing serious. I don't want them to worry." Beth Thomas nodded, understanding that Matthew's primary concern was protecting his children from unnecessary anxiety. She watched as the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, noting the genuine care and professionalism with which they treated their patient. As the ambulance pulled away with lights flashing, Beth stood in the maintenance office looking at the scattered paperwork that had fallen when Matthew collapsed.
Austin was gathering the documents, ensuring nothing was lost or damaged. "He's one of the best mechanics I've ever worked with," Austin said quietly. "He's been pushing himself too hard for months, working every available shift to support his
family." Beth picked up one of the forms Matthew had been completing, noting the precise handwriting and meticulous attention to detail, even while exhausted. "Austin, what do you know about his family situation?" "He's been raising his 2 teenagers alone since his wife died a couple of years ago. Medical bills from her cancer treatment left them in serious financial trouble. He works as many hours as possible to keep up with expenses and save money for his kids' futures." The information confirmed what Beth had suspected from observing Matthew throughout the day. His dedication wasn't just professional pride, it was driven by necessity
and love for his family. "I'm going to call his daughter," Beth said, dialing the number Matthew had provided. "She needs to know what happened and that he's being taken care of." But as Beth waited for Hannah to answer, she was already forming plans that would go far
beyond simple concern for a skilled technician who had collapsed from exhaustion. What she had witnessed that day was more than technical expertise. It was character, dedication, and the kind of work ethic that deserved recognition and reward. The phone rang 3 times before Hannah Coleman answered, her voice carrying the casual tone of a teenager expecting a routine call from a friend. "Hello? Hannah, this is Beth Thomas. Your father asked me to call you. He's been taken to the hospital, but I want you to know right away that he's going to be fine." The silence that followed lasted several seconds before Hannah's voice returned, tight with fear. "What happened? Is he hurt? Which hospital?" He collapsed from exhaustion at work after completing a very demanding aircraft repair. The paramedics said his vital signs are good, and it appears to be severe fatigue rather than anything more serious. They've taken him to Riverside Community Hospital for evaluation and treatment. Beth could hear Hannah's sharp intake of breath, followed by muffled conversation as she apparently shared the news with her younger brother. The fear in the teenager's voice was heartbreaking, reminding Beth that these children had already lost one parent and were terrified of losing another. "We need to get to the hospital," Hannah said, her voice shaking slightly. "But we don't have a car, and I don't have money for a taxi." "Hannah, I'm going to come pick you up and take you to the hospital. Where do you live?" "You don't have to do that. We can figure something out." "I want to help. Your father did exceptional work on my aircraft today, and I could see how much he cares about you and your brother. Please let me drive you to see him." During the 20-minute drive to pick up the children, Beth Thomas found herself making a decision that went beyond simple courtesy. She had spent her entire career recognizing exceptional talent and creating opportunities for people to excel. What she had observed in Matthew Coleman was exactly the kind of character and capability she had built her success on recognizing. But more than that, she had seen a man destroying himself through overwork because he was determined to provide for his family. The injustice of that situation, a man of obvious skill and integrity trapped by circumstances, was something she had both the power and the responsibility to address. As she drove toward the Coleman family's apartment, Beth was already considering how she could transform not just Matthew's career, but his entire family's future. Beth Thomas pulled up to the modest apartment complex where the Coleman family lived. The buildings were well maintained, but clearly budget housing, the kind of place where working families lived when money was tight, but pride remained intact. Hannah and Marcus Jr. were waiting outside, and Beth could see the worry etched on their young faces. Hannah was 16, tall and serious-looking, with her father's intelligent eyes and an air of responsibility that seemed beyond her years. Marcus Jr., 14, was smaller and more obviously worried, fidgeting with a basketball he carried everywhere. "Are you sure Dad's okay?" Marcus asked as soon as he got in the car. "He's been working so much lately, we hardly see him except when he comes home exhausted." "The paramedics were very reassuring," Beth replied, pulling away from the complex. "They said it looked like exhaustion and dehydration, nothing that proper rest and medical attention can't fix." During the drive to Riverside Community Hospital, Beth learned more about the Coleman family's situation. Hannah was a senior in high school with excellent grades, hoping to attend Kansas State University, but worried about tuition costs. Marcus Jr. was a good student and talented basketball player whose shoes were indeed worn beyond safe use for athletic activities. "Dad feels terrible that he can't afford to send me to college without student loans," Hannah said quietly. "He keeps talking about picking up extra shifts to save money for tuition, but he's already working himself to death." "What happened to your mother?" Beth asked gently. "Cancer," Marcus Jr. answered simply. 2 years ago, the treatments didn't work and the medical bills were huge. Dad sold our house and most of our stuff to pay the hospitals, but there's still debt he's working to pay off." The information confirmed everything Beth had suspected about Matthew's circumstances, a man working himself to exhaustion, not from greed or ambition, but from love and responsibility. The kind of situation that could be transformed with the right opportunity and resources. At Riverside Community Hospital, they found Matthew in the emergency department, awake and alert, but connected to an IV drip. His color had improved significantly, and he managed a weak smile when he saw his children approaching his bedside. "I'm sorry I scared you," he said, reaching out to take Hannah's hand. "The doctor says I just need rest and better nutrition. Nothing serious." Dr. Gregory Hughes, the emergency physician treating Matthew, approached the family with straightforward manner. Mr. Coleman's test results showed dehydration, low blood sugar, and elevated stress hormones consistent with chronic overwork. His heart and other organs are fine, but his body is telling him he needs to make some changes in his work schedule. "Doctor, I can't reduce my work hours," Matthew said firmly. "I have financial obligations and 2 children depending on me." Dr. Hughes had heard similar statements from many patients, particularly single parents, struggling to balance economic necessity with personal health. "Mr. Coleman, If you continue at this pace without adequate rest and nutrition, you're going to have more serious health problems. Your body can only handle so much stress before it breaks down completely. Beth Thomas had been listening from a respectful distance, but she found herself stepping closer to the bedside. The medical advice was sound, but it didn't address the underlying economic pressures that drove Matthew's unsustainable work schedule. "Mr. Coleman, would it be all right if I spoke with you privately for a few minutes?" Beth asked. "There's something I'd like to discuss." Matthew looked puzzled, but
Nodded agreement.
Hannah and Marcus Jr. stepped out into the hallway with Dr. Hughes to discuss their father's treatment plan, leaving Beth alone with Matthew in the emergency department cubicle. "Mr. Coleman, I haven't been entirely honest about who I am," Beth began, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "My name is Elizabeth Thornton, and I'm the CEO of Thornton Technologies. I was traveling under an assumed name for privacy reasons." Matthew's expression showed confusion mixed with concern. He had no idea why a technology company executive would reveal her identity to him or what this might mean for his family. "I observed your work today very carefully," Elizabeth continued. "Not just your technical skills, which are extraordinary, but your character, your work ethic, and your dedication to doing things correctly, regardless of personal cost. I also learned about your family situation and the circumstances that drive you to work such demanding schedules." "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not looking for charity," Matthew said quietly. "I can take care of my family." "This isn't charity, Mr. Coleman. This is business. Thornton Technologies has been developing plans for an aerospace division focused on aircraft safety and maintenance technology. We need someone with your expertise to lead the technical development and implementation of new maintenance protocols." Elizabeth paused, watching Matthew's reaction carefully. She could see he was processing her words, but struggling to understand what she was proposing. "I'm offering you a position as Director of Aviation Safety Technology, based in our Kansas City facility. The salary would be $120,000 annually, plus full benefits, education assistance for your children, and stock options in the company." The silence that followed was profound. Matthew stared at Elizabeth, trying to comprehend how his life could change so dramatically in the space of a single conversation. The salary she mentioned was nearly 3 times what he currently earned, enough to transform his family's circumstances completely. What Matthew didn't realize was that Elizabeth Thornton had spent her entire career making exactly these kinds
Of decisions, recognizing exceptional talent, and creating opportunities for it to flourish.
What she had witnessed in that hangar wasn't just technical competence, but the rare combination of expertise, integrity, and dedication that formed the foundation of truly successful organizations. The downfall of Matthew's old life of struggle and exhaustion had begun the moment Elizabeth decided he deserved something better.
"I don't understand," Matthew said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know anything about me except what you observed today. How can you offer someone a job like that based on a few hours of watching them work?" Elizabeth moved
closer to Matthew's bedside, her expression serious and sincere. "Mr. Coleman, I've been successful in business because I recognize exceptional talent when I see it. Today, I watched you solve complex technical problems under extreme pressure, maintain absolute professional standards despite personal exhaustion, and demonstrate leadership and teaching abilities that can't be learned from textbooks." She paused, making sure he was listening carefully. "More importantly, I saw your character. You pushed yourself to the point of collapse because you were determined to complete your work correctly and safely. You put the welfare of others ahead of your own comfort and health. Those are qualities that can't be taught or bought." "But I'm just an aircraft mechanic," Matthew protested. "I don't have experience running technology development programs or managing large budgets." "You have something more valuable than experience in corporate management," Elizabeth replied. You have expertise in the field we're entering, and you understand the real-world applications of the technology we want to develop. You also have the kind of integrity and work ethic that makes other people want to follow your leadership. Matthew's mind was reeling with the implications of Elizabeth's offer. The salary alone would solve his family's financial problems and provide security he hadn't dared hope for. But the opportunity seemed almost too good to be real. Why aviation safety? Technology? He asked. There are many areas where technology companies can expand, because aviation maintenance is critical to saving lives, and current systems aren't adequate for the complexity of modern aircraft. Today's repair process you completed would have been impossible without your specific expertise. We need to develop systems and protocols that can help other mechanics handle complex problems more efficiently and safely. The explanation resonated with Matthew's professional experience. He had encountered many situations where better diagnostic tools or more systematic approaches could have saved time and improved safety. The idea of helping develop such systems was professionally exciting. I would need to learn about business, management, corporate procedures, technology development processes, Matthew said, thinking through the challenges of such a career transition. We would provide complete training and support. You wouldn't be expected to manage business operations immediately. Initially, you would focus on technical development while learning corporate management skills. We have experienced business managers who would handle administrative functions while you concentrate on the technical aspects. Elizabeth could see that Matthew was seriously considering her offer, but she also recognized the overwhelm of someone whose life was being offered, a complete transformation. She decided to give him space to process the opportunity. Mr. Coleman, I don't need an answer today. You need time to recover from your exhaustion and discuss this with your children. But I want you to know that this offer is genuine, and I believe you would be extraordinarily successful in this role. Hannah and Marcus Jr. returned to the cubicle, their faces showing relief that their father appeared to be recovering well. Dr. Hughes followed them, carrying discharge instructions and recommendations for Matthew's recovery. Mr. Coleman, I'm releasing you with instructions for rest, proper nutrition, and a follow-up appointment with your primary care physician, Dr. Hughes said. Most importantly, you need to address the work schedule that led to this exhaustion. Elizabeth stood to leave, giving the family privacy to discuss Matthew's medical care and recovery, but before departing, she placed her business card on the bedside table. My personal contact information is on that card, she told Matthew. When you're
ready to discuss the position we talked about, please call me. There's no pressure and no time limit on the offer.
As Elizabeth left the hospital, she reflected on her decision to offer Matthew such a significant opportunity. Her success in business had been built on recognizing exceptional people and creating situations where their talents could flourish. Matthew Coleman represented exactly the kind of person she wanted leading her company's expansion into aviation technology. But more than his technical abilities, what had impressed her was his character under pressure. In a world where many people looked for shortcuts or excuses, she had found someone who maintained absolute standards regardless of personal cost. That integrity, combined with his obvious expertise, made him exactly the kind of leader her company
needed. The confrontation with his old life of struggle and limitation was over.
Matthew Coleman now faced a choice that would determine not just his own future, but the future of his entire family. Elizabeth Thornton had handed him the key to transformation. All he had to do was decide to use it. 3 days after his collapse, Matthew sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment, staring at Elizabeth Thornton's business card while his children ate breakfast before school. The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind of recovery, reflection, and research as he tried to process the extraordinary opportunity that had been presented to him. "Dad, you've been looking at that card for 3 days," Hannah observed, spreading peanut butter on toast with the careful precision that came from making a small jar last as long as possible. Are you going to call her or not? It's not that simple, sweetheart, Matthew replied, turning the elegant business card
over in his weathered hands.
This would change everything for our family. We'd have to move to Kansas City. You'd have to change schools in your senior year. Marcus would have to leave his basketball team. Marcus Jr. looked up from his cereal, his expression mixing excitement with apprehension. Dad, Kansas City has great basketball programs. And if this job pays what she said, you wouldn't have to work 70 hours a week anymore. We'd actually get to see you. The comment hit Matthew harder than his son probably intended. The truth was that he had been working such long hours that he had missed most of his children's lives over the past 2 years. School events, basketball games, parent-teacher conferences beyond the required ones, simple family dinners together. Have you researched this Thornton Technologies company? Hannah asked, demonstrating the practical thinking that reminded Matthew so much of her mother. We should know if this is legitimate before making any decisions. Matthew had indeed spent considerable time researching Elizabeth Thornton and her company. Thornton Technologies was a major player in industrial automation and safety systems with annual revenues exceeding $2 billion. Elizabeth herself was featured regularly in business publications as one of the most successful female executives in the technology sector. The company is very real and very successful, Matthew confirmed. Elizabeth Thornton has a reputation for innovative thinking and treating employees well, but that doesn't make this situation any less overwhelming. The landline phone rang. Interrupting their breakfast conversation, Matthew answered, expecting a call from work about another emergency repair situation. Mr. Coleman, this is Vincent Ramirez. I heard about what happened at the airport. Are you feeling better? Vincent had been Matthew's mentor during his early years in aviation maintenance, a respected technician who had taught Matthew much of what he knew about complex aircraft systems. Now retired, Vincent occasionally checked in with his former protégé, especially when word traveled through the tight-knit aviation community about significant events. I'm recovering well, Vincent. Thank you for calling. Matthew, I also heard something interesting from my contacts at the airport. Word is that some big-shot CEO offered you a high-level position after watching you work. Is that true? The aviation maintenance community in Kansas was small enough that news traveled quickly, especially news as unusual as a billionaire CEO offering a job to a local mechanic. Matthew wasn't surprised that Vincent had heard about Elizabeth's offer. It's true, but I'm still trying to decide what to do. It would mean a complete career change and relocating my family. Matthew, in 40 years of aircraft maintenance, I've seen a lot of talented technicians. Most of them never get recognition beyond their immediate workplace. If someone with real influence has recognized your abilities, you need to seriously consider that opportunity. Vincent's perspective carried weight with Matthew. The older man had seen careers flourish and stagnate, had watched talented people remain trapped in circumstances that didn't reflect their capabilities. His endorsement
of Elizabeth's offer was significant, but what if I'm not qualified for that kind of corporate responsibility?
I've never managed anything larger than a maintenance crew. Management skills can be learned, Matthew. Character and technical expertise can't be taught. If this woman is as successful as you say, she knows what she's looking for in people. Trust her judgment about your capabilities. After ending the call with Vincent, Matthew sat quietly for several minutes, weighing the counsel of someone whose opinion he deeply respected. Hannah and Marcus Jr. had been listening to the conversation, and both could see their father's internal struggle with the decision. "Dad, what are you afraid of?" Hannah asked directly. "This sounds like an amazing opportunity." Matthew considered his daughter's question carefully. His fears weren't simple or easily explained. Fear of failure in an unfamiliar environment, fear of leaving the community and work he knew well, fear that the opportunity was too good to be true. But underlying all of these was a deeper fear. I'm afraid of not being good enough, he admitted quietly. What if I take this job and can't live up to their expectations? What if I fail and we end up worse off than we are now? Marcus Jr. reached across the table and touched his father's arm. Dad, you've never failed at anything important. You kept our family together when Mom died. You work harder than anyone I know. If this lady thinks you can do the job, maybe you should believe her. The simple faith his 14-year-old son expressed in his abilities was both humbling and encouraging. Matthew realized that his children had more confidence in his capabilities than he did himself. That afternoon, Matthew made a decision. Instead of calling Elizabeth Thornton immediately, he drove to Westmont Regional Airport to discuss the situation with Veronica Gutierrez. As his supervisor for the past 8 years, she knew his work better than anyone and could provide perspective on whether such a career transition made sense. He found Veronica in her office reviewing maintenance schedules and staffing assignments. The paperwork scattered across her desk reminded Matthew of the administrative responsibilities that would be part of any corporate management position. Matt, good to see you looking better. How are you feeling? Much better, thanks, Veronica.
I need to ask your opinion about something confidential.
Matthew explained Elizabeth's offer, watching his supervisor's expression change from curiosity to amazement as he detailed the position and compensation being offered. Veronica had worked in aviation maintenance management for 15 years and understood both the industry and Matthew's capabilities. Matt, this is an incredible opportunity, but you seem hesitant about it. I've never worked in corporate management.
I don't know anything about technology development or business operations. What if I'm not qualified for this kind of responsibility? Veronica leaned back in her chair, studying Matthew with the analytical approach she applied to complex maintenance problems.
Let me ask you something. When we had that emergency with the charter flight's engine failure last year, who did I call to handle the situation? You called me because the other mechanics couldn't diagnose the problem. Right. And when the FAA inspector came for our certification review, who did I assign to walk through our maintenance procedures with him? Me, because you said I understood the regulations better than anyone. And when we needed someone to train the new mechanics on complex aircraft systems, who taught those classes? Matthew began to see where Veronica was leading the conversation. I did. Matt, you've been doing management and leadership work for years. You just haven't had the title or the salary that reflects those responsibilities. This Elizabeth Thornton person recognized what I've known for a long time. You have the skills and character to succeed at a much higher level. The validation from someone who had observed his work daily for years carried tremendous weight. Veronica's assessment helped Matthew understand that his self-doubt might be preventing him from
recognizing his own qualifications.
But corporate management is different from shop floor leadership. The principles are the same: understanding complex systems, solving problems, leading people, maintaining safety standards. The environment might be different, but the core
skills transfer. Veronica stood up and walked to the window overlooking the maintenance hangar where Matthew had worked for so many years.
Matt, you've been putting your life on hold since Grace died, working yourself to exhaustion to pay bills and support your kids. This opportunity could give you back a life, not just financial security. What about the department here? You depend on my experience with the complex repairs. I'll miss having you here, but I won't let my needs hold back your opportunity. We'll figure out how to manage without you. Good people deserve chances to grow beyond their current circumstances. That evening, Matthew sat with his children at their small dining table, sharing takeout pizza they could afford because he had worked overtime the previous week. The contrast between their current financial constraints and the opportunities Elizabeth's offer would provide was stark and undeniable. I've decided to call Elizabeth Thornton tomorrow, Matthew announced. If you're both willing to make this change, I think we should seriously explore this opportunity." Hannah's face lit up with excitement mixed with relief. "Dad, this could solve so many problems. I could go to college without you working yourself to death to pay for it. And I could play basketball on a team with better facilities and coaching," Marcus Jr. added. "Plus, we'd get to spend more time with you." Matthew felt a weight lifting from his shoulders as he made the commitment to pursue Elizabeth's offer. The decision represented more than just a job change. It was a choice to believe in himself and accept that his family deserved better circumstances than their current struggles provided. "There will be challenges," Matthew warned his children. "New city, new schools, new responsibilities for me. We'll need to support each other through the transition." "We've gotten through harder things than this," Hannah said simply. "When we lost Mum, we figured out how to be a family. This is just figuring out how to be a family with better opportunities." The next morning, Matthew dialed Elizabeth Thornton's direct number, his hands steadier than they had been in days. When she answered, her genuine warmth helped ease his
nervousness. "Miss Thornton, this is Matthew Coleman. You asked me to call when I was ready to discuss the position you offered." "Mr. Coleman, I'm delighted to hear from you. How are you feeling?"
"I've been concerned about your recovery since the hospital. I'm feeling much better, thank you. I've had time to think about your offer, and I'd like to explore the possibility of accepting the position." 3 months later, Matthew stood in his spacious office at Thornton Technologies, overlooking the Kansas City skyline. The transformation in his life had been remarkable, not just professionally, but personally. Hannah was thriving in her new high school, taking advanced placement, courses that would transfer to universities. Marcus Jr. had made the varsity basketball team and was maintaining honor roll grades. The house they had purchased in Overland Park had become a true home. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a 2-car garage, and a backyard where they could host barbecues for Matthew's new colleagues and his children's friends. The mortgage payments, while substantial, were manageable on Matthew's new salary. Matthew's professional development had progressed faster than anyone had anticipated. The Aviation Safety Division had successfully completed its first major project, developing diagnostic protocols that were being tested by maintenance facilities across the country. The results exceeded expectations, with participating facilities reporting significant improvements in repair efficiency and safety compliance. "Matthew, the preliminary results from the beta testing program are exceptional," Dr. Patricia Wells reported during their weekly team meeting. "Maintenance times have decreased by an average of 30%, while diagnostic accuracy has improved by over 40%. The success had attracted attention from major airlines and aircraft manufacturers. Elizabeth had been fielding inquiries from industry leaders who wanted to license the technology or partner with Thornton Technologies on expanded development projects. "We're getting requests for presentations at 3 major aviation conferences," Elizabeth informed Matthew during one of their monthly progress reviews. "The industry is taking notice of what your team has accomplished." The professional recognition was gratifying, but Matthew was most proud of the practical impact their work was having on aviation safety. Maintenance technicians at facilities using their protocols were identifying problems more quickly and accurately, reducing the likelihood of in-flight emergencies caused by undetected mechanical issues. Austin Reed had visited Kansas City twice to observe the development work and provide feedback on the practical applications of the new diagnostic systems. His perspective as a working mechanic helped ensure that the technology remained grounded in real-world maintenance environments. "Matt, what you've created here is going to change how aircraft maintenance is performed industry-wide," Austin observed during his most recent visit. "The diagnostic protocols eliminate a lot of the guesswork that leads to missed problems or unnecessary repairs." Vincent Ramirez had also visited the Thornton Technologies facility, bringing with him several other experienced aviation maintenance professionals who wanted to see the diagnostic systems in operation. Their feedback had been instrumental in refining the protocols for broader industry adoption. Matthew, in 40 years of aircraft maintenance, I've never seen technology that addresses practical problems as effectively as what you've developed here, Vincent said during the facility tour. This is the kind of innovation the industry has needed for decades. 6 months after starting his position, Elizabeth approached Matthew with an expanded opportunity. Matthew, I want to discuss the next phase of your career development. The success of the Aviation Safety Division has positioned you for broader responsibilities within Thornton Technologies. She offered him oversight responsibility for the entire safety technology group: aviation, industrial safety, and automotive. Safety divisions, he would be managing a team of over 60 people and a development budget of $15 million annually. I'm interested, but I'd want to ensure that I can continue contributing to the aviation safety work, Matthew replied. That program still has tremendous potential for industry impact. Absolutely. You'd maintain direct involvement in aviation, safety development, while taking on strategic oversight of the broader safety technology group. We'd also provide additional management training and business development education. As Matthew drove home that evening, he reflected on the extraordinary changes that had occurred in his family's life. The financial stress that had dominated their existence had been replaced by security and opportunity. His children were pursuing goals that had seemed impossible when they lived in their cramped apartment. The house was filled with the sound of a normal family evening when he arrived. Hannah was on the phone with a college admission counselor discussing scholarship opportunities. Marcus Jr. was in the backyard practicing basketball shots, his form improved by months of professional coaching. "Dad, dinner's almost ready," Hannah called from the kitchen. Marcus made the honor roll again, and Coach Williams wants to nominate him for the regional all-star team. After dinner, the three of them sat in their comfortable living room discussing Hannah's college plans and Marcus Jr.'s high school preparation. The contrast with their previous living situation was stark, but more importantly, their relationships had deepened as financial stress had decreased. "Dad, do you ever miss working on aircraft directly?" Hannah asked during a quiet moment in their conversation. Matthew considered the question carefully. He did miss some aspects of direct maintenance work, but his current position allowed him to influence aviation safety on a much broader scale. "I miss some aspects of hands-on work," he replied honestly. "But what I'm doing now has the potential to help thousands of maintenance technicians do their jobs more effectively and safely. The impact is much greater than what I could achieve working on individual aircraft. Plus, you're not exhausted all the time anymore," Marcus Jr. observed. "We actually get to spend time together as a family." That evening, after his children had gone to bed, Matthew sat alone in his comfortable home office looking at a framed photo of Grace that had traveled with them from their old apartment. He thought about how proud she would be of their family's transformation, not just the material improvements, but the opportunities now available to their children. The story that had begun with a struggling single father working himself to exhaustion had evolved into an account of professional recognition, family stability, and the power of exceptional people to create opportunities for others. Matthew's expertise and character had been recognized and rewarded, but more importantly, his children now had access to the kind of future their mother had dreamed of for them. The journey from financial desperation to professional success had taken less than a year, but the foundation for that transformation had been built through decades of developing expertise, maintaining integrity, and never giving up on his family's potential for a better life. Elizabeth Thornton had provided the opportunity, but Matthew Coleman had earned it through years of dedication to excellence in everything he did. Sometimes, when you refuse to compromise your standards, even when life becomes impossibly difficult, the right person notices at exactly the right moment, and everything changes. As Matthew prepared for bed in his comfortable home, surrounded by the security and opportunities that Elizabeth's recognition had created, he felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the material improvements in their lives, but for the reminder that dedication and integrity, even when no one seems to be watching, eventually find their reward. The collapse in that airport hangar had seemed like his lowest moment. Instead, it had become the catalyst for the most positive transformation his family had ever experienced. Sometimes, the moment when you think you can't go on is exactly when someone notices that you never stopped trying to do the right thing. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.